Picture this, an army of secret agents. No gadgets, no walkie-talkies, not even hands, just wings, and a phenomenal ability to identify ships more accurately than early computer algorithms. Yes, I'm talking about pigeons. And yes, they were actual spies. Now, I know what you're thinking. Pigeons? Those flying rats that steal my sandwich in the park. The very same. But here's the thing. While you were dodging their droppings on city sidewalks, these birds were being trained by military intelligence to spot enemy submarines and warships with precision that would make a Navy analyst jealous. This isn't a joke. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is documented, declassified, absurdly real history. When we think spy, we picture James Bond in a tuxedo, right? Maybe a femme fatale with a hidden camera in her lipstick. But in the 20th century, intelligence agencies looked at pigeons and thought, you know what? These guys might be our best bet. And they were right. Today, I'm going to tell you about the classified pigeon programs that governments try to keep quiet, about birds that went through boot camp, about missions that sound too ridiculous to be true, but are 100% verified. So buckle up, because this story has everything. Cold War paranoia, unexpected heroes, and the kind of military logic that makes you wonder if someone spiked the Pentagon's coffee. Let's dive in. Okay, so first things first. Why on earth would anyone look at a pigeon and think, you know what? Covert operative material, right there. To understand that, we need to go back. Way back. It's the mid-20th century. World War II has just ended, but the world isn't exactly peaceful. The Cold War is ramping up. The Soviet Union and the United States are in a technological arms race, and everyone's paranoid about surprise attacks. Here's the problem. Detecting enemy ships and submarines is hard. Early radar systems? Unreliable. They'd pick up everything from fishing boats to clouds, and sometimes just nothing. Human observers scanning the horizon with binoculars? They got tired. They blinked. They looked away at the wrong moment. One cup of coffee too many, and boom, you miss the enemy destroyer that's about to ruin your whole day. The military needed something consistent. Something that didn't need coffee breaks or suffer from Monday morning brain fog. Something that could process visual information quickly and accurately for hours on end. And then, someone, probably after a very long night at the lab, had a wild idea. What if we used birds? I imagine there was a long silence in that meeting room. Someone probably laughed. Someone else probably filed a complaint with HR. But then the actual research started rolling in, and suddenly, it wasn't so funny anymore. Turns out, pigeons have some pretty remarkable abilities that we completely overlook because, well, they're pigeons. First, their vision. Pigeons can see ultraviolet light. They process visual information faster than humans. They can detect tiny differences in color, shape, and pattern that we completely miss. Their eyes can track multiple moving objects simultaneously without losing focus. Second, their memory. Pigeons have extraordinary visual memory. Show them an image once, and they'll remember it for years. Not days, not weeks, years. Third, and this is where it gets interesting, they can be trained to perform complex visual discrimination tasks with accuracy rates that rival, and sometimes exceed, humans. Scientists started running experiments. Could pigeons distinguish between different types of objects? Yes. Could they categorize images? Absolutely. Could they do it consistently, over and over, without getting bored or distracted? Oh yes. Yes, they could. And that's when military intelligence officers started paying very close attention. Because if you could train a pigeon to recognize the difference between, say, a merchant vessel and a warship, well, that's useful. Really useful. And if that pigeon could do it more reliably than a tired sailor staring through binoculars at 3 a.m., that's a game changer. So they decided to test it. And what happened next sounds like something out of a cartoon, except it's all real. Let me introduce you to a man named B.F. Skinner. Now, if you've taken Psychology 101, you know him as the guy who invented the Skinner box, that thing where rats press levers for food, behavioral conditioning, and all that. But what they don't usually teach you in Psych 101 is that during World War II, Skinner had an absolutely bonkers idea that he pitched to the military. He called it Project Pigeon, and the pitch was this. What if we put pigeons inside missile guidance systems? Yes, you heard that right. Pigeons. Inside. Misil. Here's how it was supposed to work. The pigeon would be strapped into a little harness inside the nose cone of a missile. In front of it would be a screen showing the view ahead as the missile flew toward its target. The pigeon would be trained to peck at the image of the target. Let's say an enemy ship. As the missile flew, the pigeon would keep pecking at the target on the screen. Those pecks would send signals to the missile's steering mechanism, guiding it toward the target. Essentially, kamikaze pigeon pilots. Now, the military looked at this proposal and thought, well, they thought a lot of things, probably. But surprisingly, they didn't immediately throw Skinner out of the building. They actually funded the research. For months, Skinner and his team trained pigeons to recognize and peck at images of ships. And you know what? It worked. The pigeons were incredibly accurate. They could distinguish between different ship types. They didn't panic under pressure. They just kept pecking away at the target with machine-like consistency. But here's where it gets awkward. The military eventually canceled the project. Not because it didn't work, it did. They canceled it because, well, how do you explain to a congressional committee that you're spending taxpayer money on suicide pigeons? Yes, Senator, we strapped birds to bombs. For America, it just wasn't a good look. But the research didn't stop. Project Pigeon might have been shut down, but the military didn't forget what they'd learned. Those experiments proved something crucial. Pigeons could be trained for sophisticated visual recognition tasks. They were reliable, they were accurate, and they were cheap. So the research continued, just in different forms. By the 1960s and 70s, as technology advanced, new possibilities emerged. Instead of guiding missiles, what if pigeons could help with surveillance? With ship identification? With early warning systems? What if they could be trained not to fly into danger, but to sit safely in a control room and identify potential threats on screens? That's exactly what happened, and it led to some of the most bizarre and effective military programs you've never heard of. All right, so now we get to the really good part. How do you actually train a pigeon to be a spy? I'm imagining a tiny pigeon wearing sunglasses and a little trench coat, but the reality is somehow even better. The training facility. The pigeons selected for these programs weren't just any pigeons. They were carefully chosen for their visual acuity, their learning speed, and their temperament. You couldn't use a nervous bird or one that got easily distracted. You needed the pigeon equivalent of a straight-A student who never skips homework. Once selected, these birds entered what can only be described as Pigeon University. The training process went something like this. Phase 1. Basic recognition. First, trainers would show pigeons simple images on screens. A circle, a square, a triangle. When the pigeon pecked at the correct shape, it would get a food reward. Classical conditioning, Pavlov will be proud. This might sound simple, but it established the foundation. Pigeons learned that paying attention to images and responding correctly meant food. And pigeons really like food. Phase 2. Complex shapes. Next level, more complex images. Silhouettes of objects. Basic ship outlines. The pigeons learned to distinguish between different categories. Merchant ship versus military vessel. Surface ship versus submarine profile. The training was gradual, systematic, and incredibly effective. Within weeks, pigeons could accurately identify dozens of different ship types with minimal error. Phase 3. Real-world conditions. This is where it gets impressive. Trainers started showing pigeons images with realistic complications, different lighting conditions, partial views, images obscured by waves or weather, moving targets. And the pigeons adapted. Their accuracy remained high even when conditions were poor, conditions where human observers would struggle. The testing station. Once training was complete, here's how the system actually worked. Imagine a small booth about the size of a phone booth. Inside is a pigeon standing in front of a screen. The screen displays live footage or images from surveillance equipment. Could be from cameras on patrol aircraft, coastal observation posts, or other monitoring systems. When the pigeon spots something matching what it was trained to identify, say a submarine silhouette, it pecks at a specific panel. That peck triggers an electronic signal. The signal alerts human operators. Multiple pigeons would often work simultaneously, looking at the same footage. If 2 or 3 pigeons all signaled an alert, the reliability went way up. It was like having a consensus vote, except the voters had feathers. Why this actually worked? Now, you might be thinking, okay, this is ridiculous. Why would this be better than just having a person watch the screen? Great question. Here's why pigeons excelled. 1. Consistency. Humans get tired. We get bored. After staring at ocean footage for hours, your attention drifts. You start thinking about lunch, or that argument you had with your roommate, or whether you left the stove on. Pigeons? They don't care about lunch debates or life drama. They see a target, they peck. Hour after hour. It's what they're trained to do, and they do it with mechanical precision. 2. Speed. Pigeons process visual information incredibly fast, faster than humans in many cases. The time between seeing and responding is almost instantaneous. In surveillance, those milliseconds matter. 3. No false assumptions. Humans have biases. We see what we expect to see. A tired operator might dismiss something unusual as probably just a fishing boat because they're ready for their shift to end. Pigeons don't make assumptions. They respond to visual patterns, period. If it looks like what they were trained to identify, they signal. No second guessing, no fatigue-induced errors. 4. Cost-effective. Training a human radar operator takes months and costs thousands of dollars. Training a pigeon takes weeks and costs, well, mostly birdseed. I'm not saying we should exploit our feathered friends, but from a military budget perspective, it's hard to argue with the ROI. The humor of it all. I have to pause here and just appreciate the absurdity of the situation. Somewhere in a classified military facility, there were pigeons in tiny booths, punching in for their shifts like it was a regular 9 to 5 job. Morning, Jim. Morning, Susan. Morning, Kevin the pigeon. Do they get employee benefits? A pension? Did one pigeon ever call in sick? Sorry, sir. Pigeon number 47 can't make it today. Says he has a wing ache. The mental image alone is worth the price of admission. Real results. But here's the thing. Despite how ridiculous this sounds, it worked. In controlled tests, pigeons consistently outperformed early computer algorithms at ship recognition. They had accuracy rates in the 90+ percentile range. They could work for extended periods without performance degradation. They didn't need software updates or system reboots. One study found that in certain visual discrimination tasks, the exact kind needed for ship identification, pigeons were not just comparable to humans, but actually better. Their false positive rate was lower. Their response time was faster. Let me repeat that pigeons were better than humans at military intelligence work. It's simultaneously hilarious and genuinely impressive. Now, here's where the story gets really interesting. Because this wasn't just laboratory experiments and theoretical proposals. These pigeons actually served. Let me share some documented cases that showcase just how serious and successful these programs became. Case Study 1, the Coast Guard Project. In the 1970s and 80s, the U.S. Coast Guard explored using pigeons for search and rescue operations. Here's the scenario. When someone goes missing at sea, every second counts. Coast Guard helicopters fly search patterns over vast areas of ocean, looking for tiny specks that might be a person in a life vest, a raft, or debris from a vessel. Human observers scan the water, but it's exhausting work. The ocean is huge. Everything kind of looks the same. Your eyes get tired. You might look away for just a moment, and that's when you miss something crucial. So they trained pigeons to spot the color orange, the standard color for life vests and emergency equipment. The pigeons were placed in a special chamber on the helicopter with windows facing down. 3 pigeons, 3 windows, all scanning the water below. When a pigeon spotted something orange, it would peck a colored disc, triggering an alert. In tests, the pigeons spotted objects that human observers missed. They had a wider field of vision. They didn't get distracted or fatigued. And because there were 3 pigeons working simultaneously, false positives were minimized. If all 3 pigeons signaled, you knew something was there. Project Sea Hunt, as it was called, demonstrated that pigeons could genuinely save lives. Think about that for a second. A pigeon, a bird we casually shoo away from our park benches, could mean the difference between life and death for someone lost at sea. Suddenly, they don't seem so silly anymore. Case Study 2. The Navy's biological detectors. During the Cold War, detecting submarines was a massive priority. Soviet subs lurking in international waters were a constant concern, and early detection was critical for national security. The Navy experimented with using pigeons as part of a multi-layered detection system. Pigeons were trained to recognize submarine periscopes, conning towers, and the distinctive wake patterns submarines create when near the surface. These weren't kamikaze missions. The pigeons worked from secure facilities, monitoring video feeds from patrol aircraft and surveillance drones. In simulations and field tests, the pigeon teams demonstrated remarkable consistency. One declassified report noted that pigeons correctly identified submarine signatures with an accuracy rate that exceeded that of junior enlisted personnel during their first year of training. Let me emphasize, pigeons were more accurate than trained human sailors. The Navy considered them a valuable backup system, a biological failsafe in case electronic systems malfunctioned or were compromised. Case Study 3. The Cancer Detection Experiment. Okay, this one's not military, but it's too incredible not to mention because it shows just how capable these birds are. In the 2000s, decades after the main Pigeon Spy programs ended, researchers decided to test whether pigeons could be trained to identify cancer in medical imaging. They showed pigeons mammogram images. Some contained cancerous tissue, some didn't. With training, pigeons learned to distinguish between the two. The results? Pigeons achieved accuracy rates comparable to human radiologists. Let that sink in. Pigeons. Diagnosing. Cancer. It's the same principle as ship identification, pattern recognition, visual discrimination, consistent performance. The pigeons weren't understanding cancer. They were identifying visual patterns they've been trained to recognize. But the implications are staggering. If pigeons can learn to spot cancer, what else might they be capable of? The unsung heroes. Here's what gets me about these stories. These pigeons never got medals. No pedats. No monuments. They just did their jobs that, frankly, they had no idea they were even doing. A pigeon doesn't know it's conducting military surveillance. It just knows, see the thing, peck the button, get the treat. Simple. But in that simplicity lies incredible effectiveness. And for a brief, strange period in history, pigeons were legitimate assets in national security and public safety operations. They were, without exaggeration, biological supercomputers dedicated to pattern recognition, with wings. So, if pigeons were so effective, why don't we still use them today? The answer is progress, but not necessarily the kind you'd expect. The rise of digital technology. By the late 1980s and into the 1990s, computer processing power was exploding. Machine learning algorithms were getting sophisticated. Digital image recognition software was improving rapidly. The military started developing automated systems that could do what pigeons did, identify objects and images, but without needing to be fed or cleaned up after. Radar technology improved dramatically. Satellite surveillance became more advanced. Thermal imaging, infrared detection, AI-powered analytics. All of these technologies made biological detection systems less necessary. It wasn't that pigeons stopped being good at their jobs. It's that computers eventually caught up. Well, mostly. The paradox. Here's the weird part. Even as technology advanced, some studies continue to show that pigeons remain competitive in specific tasks. A paper published in the 2010s found that pigeons still outperformed certain computer algorithms, in particular types of visual discrimination, especially in scenarios with poor image quality, unusual lighting, or partially obscure targets. Pigeons have millions of years of evolution optimizing their vision and pattern recognition. Computer vision is, relatively speaking, still in its infancy. In some edge cases, especially in situations where conditions are unpredictable, those millions of years of evolution still have an advantage. But here's the thing, you can't easily scale pigeons. You can't download an update to improve a pigeon's performance. You can't deploy pigeons remotely via satellite. Technology might not always be better, but it's more flexible, more scalable, and doesn't require a logistics chain that includes birdseed and cages. So the programs quietly ended. Not with fanfare, not with official announcements, just quietly shelved as budgets shifted to digital solutions. What happened to the pigeons? I know you're wondering. What happened to all these trained spy pigeons? The truth is, we don't really know. Most were probably retired to aviaries or released. Some may have been rehomed. A few might still be alive today, former operatives living out their golden years pecking at breadcrumbs in a park somewhere, their classified service records sealed away in some Pentagon archive. Imagine, you're feeding pigeons in the park, tossing crumbs to what you think are just ordinary birds. But maybe one of them is a decorated veteran of the Coast Guard. Maybe one of them has more confirmed ship identifications than most Navy ensigns. You'll never know. And honestly, that's kind of beautiful. So what's the takeaway from all this? The story of Pigeon Spies is, at its heart, a reminder of human ingenuity and humility. We tend to think of ourselves as the smartest species, the most capable, the most sophisticated. We build computers and satellites and AI systems, and we're pretty impressed with ourselves. But sometimes the best solution isn't the most high-tech one. Sometimes nature figured it out millions of years ago, and we just need to be humble enough to recognize that. Pigeons don't have PhDs. They don't have security clearances. They definitely don't have LinkedIn profiles listing military intelligence analyst as their job title. But for a time, they were better at certain jobs than we were. And that's not embarrassing. It's fascinating. It reminds us to look for solutions in unexpected places, to question our assumptions about what's valuable and what's not, to appreciate the incredible abilities all around us, even in creatures we usually ignore or dismiss. The future? Will we ever return to biological detection systems? Maybe, probably in some form. As we develop more sophisticated biohybrid technologies, systems that combine biological and digital components, we might see a renaissance of biodetection. Imagine pigeons enhanced with miniature cameras, transmitting real-time data while using their natural abilities. Or AI systems trained on data gathered by biological observers, combining the best of both worlds. The line between natural and artificial is blurring. And in that blurred space, there's room for pigeons to make a comeback. Or maybe not. Maybe pigeons had their moment, did their duty, and now get to just be pigeons. Either way, they've earned their place in the history books, even if most of those books are still classified. So next time you see a pigeon waddling around, stealing French fries, or pooping on someone's car, take a second to appreciate them. Because that ordinary bird, it's part of a lineage that once served in military intelligence. It has abilities that took engineers decades to replicate with computers. It is, in its own way, extraordinary. The story of Pigeon Spies is a story about seeing beyond the obvious, about recognizing that extraordinary capabilities can exist in the most unexpected packages. And it's a reminder that sometimes the truth really is stranger than fiction. Now, if you enjoyed this story, here's a question for you. Would you want to see an episode about other biological spies and agents? I'm talking dolphins trained for underwater sabotage, rats detecting landmines, even insects used for surveillance. The world of biointelligence is way bigger than just pigeons. And trust me, some of these stories are even wilder. Let me know in the comments. Hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. And remember, respect the pigeons. They've seen things. They know things. They're watching. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.